Hi, I'm Laura, your connection coach. Have you ever felt lonely? In a world that feels increasingly divided, it is more important than ever to find ways to connect with others. Loneliness is a common experience, but it doesn't have to be a permanent one. On the Bliss Republic podcast, we explore all the ways we connect with each other and discuss the benefit of having strong relationships. We believe that the key to overcoming loneliness is connection. My guests come from all walks of life and will hear about their unique experience with connection. Whether you're looking to deepen your existing relationships, build new ones, or simply feel more connected to the world around you, the Bliss Republic podcast is for you. Today with us, we have Cathy Williams. Cathy is a movement and expressive arts therapist. She lives and works out of Melbourne, Australia, and she released a book called The Body Wisdom, a guide to connecting with your intuitive self, which is available on her website. And also, if you want to find her on Instagram, we'll give you the handle later on. You offer different online courses and workshops that people can join from all around the world. You're also offering in-person workshops in Melbourne. So welcome to the Bliss Republic podcast, and let's go into how we've met.
Thanks, Lara. Thanks for having me. Lara and I met at a mutual friend's Blessing Way ceremony. Now, a Blessing Way ceremony is a gathering of sisters that come together and celebrate the initiation of a woman going from maiden to mother. So our friend was very far along pregnant. I think she was about 38 weeks or something when we all got together in ceremony for her. And it was my first time flying up to Sydney to meet most of her Sydney friends. So that's where I met yourself, and I felt a very kindred connection with you pretty much straight off the bat.
Yeah, I remember that was a very beautiful weekend. So Cathy, you are working as a movement and expressive arts therapist and community facilitator. What do you exactly do?
Basically, I create spaces and experiences where I bring people together and I facilitate them through a journey. And the journey is usually about creative self-discovery. We have different themes depending on the intention of the gathering or the workshop. I use the modalities of movement, so connecting with our body and our breath, and intuitive movement, so how our body wishes to feel. Nothing's choreographed. It's all about following the impulses of the body and letting our body lead. And different creative art modalities. So everything from process drawing to painting to clay work to collage and reflective writing.
Do you have like a handful of different modalities that people choose, or how do you go about what modality is needed?
What I tend to do in workshops is a combination always of movement and art, and that depends on what the workshop is, what the theme is, but there's quite a variety of different art modalities that we can use, and some of it's, really quick, just getting something out onto the paper, or other times we're actually creating something, and it might be we're creating a collective piece together. So everyone sort of has a piece and it's a group artwork in the end.
What's the intention of people coming to your workshop?
People can come and be drawn to a workshop because of the theme. So it might be about connecting deeply with their body. If they're feeling as if they're disconnected from their body, or they're spending a lot of time at work and they're in need of a bit of self-love, self-compassion, self-care. If they're in a particular state where they're working through a challenge, be it anxiety or they're spiraling about a decision that they need to make in their life, then they can bring that there.
So you're working out of a studio where it seems you hold a lot of different tools. Like you said earlier, you're working with clay, and then you're working with paint, and then you're working with movement and dance. How do you prepare a session?
With one-on-one sessions, I invite the individual to fill out a form with some questions where they are required to reflect on what their personal intention is. You know, what are they curious about? What are they working with? What are their needs? What do they feel that they want support with? And that form kind of gives me a specific idea of where that person is at. And from their answers, I get ideas of different processes that I can take them through.
And what is the ultimate goal of that process?
It's a few things. It's to remind them that they have a body. It's to nurture that dialogue between our heart and our body and our mind, which we often either have barriers to or there's resistance to, and be deeply listening and giving themselves permission to feel what comes up and to follow that. So it's less about me telling them what to do and more about me opening and holding a space for them to be guided from within. We are constantly bombarded with different things in our society where we are looking outside of ourselves for answers. And so, what I hope to do is to create a space where people can deeply listen and reconnect to themselves and their intuition and be guided from that place rather than outside of themselves.
And so, what role does the body play in connecting with your intuition?
I believe that the body plays a huge role. Our bodies carry us, our bodies go through everything that we go through. It holds memory. Our bodies can tell us things if we are willing to listen and if we give ourselves the space and the time to understand what it's trying to tell us. I didn't quite understand this for many years of my life. And that's when people get sick, is because they can disconnect from their body and what their body is trying to tell us. We can heal through the body and in partnership with the body. And that inner compass, intuition, guidance, body wisdom, and being able to tune into what we know is best for us in any given situation.
So, if someone is really connected to their intuition, what does that look like?
So, if we're going with the belief, which is my personal belief, that our intuition is like an inner compass, it's an inner guidance that we can gain access to, we are able to check in with ourselves at any given time and ask the question, does this feel right for me? Is this the next step? Do I feel like doing this? Does this feel good? Does this feel supportive? And you've kind of got that immediate sounding board, that immediate access to that guidance of whether or not that's something that you want to do. When our connection to our intuition is disrupted or non-existent, or there's a few barriers to accessing it, we don't know how to make decisions. Our intuition can help us ground and center in ourselves and our values and feeling into really what is supportive for our heart and our body and that season in our life, which is often a really quiet inner knowing.
What if I go with what feels good for me at the time and I regret that decision?
What I'm learning more and more these days is if I'm more intuitively led and I'm going with how I'm feeling at any given moment, then I can't be angry at myself or regretful because I'm supporting what I feel to do in that moment. That might not be the case for everyone, though. It's a choice. You're making a choice about how you choose to live and what your value system is and what that looks like for you.
Is it important to know your value system working alongside with your intuition?
I definitely feel like it helps because values can be like the foundation in which you move from. And in my experience, if I know my values, if I'm really clear on them, then I know when something goes against my values. Well, I know when I'm not embodying my values, and I know when I'm making a decision that is misaligned with my values and what I believe and how I wish to be and show up in the world.
What if people are faced with a decision where the answer is aligned with their values, but their intuition says no?
Do you have an example?
For example, they are in a relationship where they're with a partner that they want, they are ready to get married and have kids. It's what they want and it's in alignment with their values. However, there's this underlying feeling and intuition that it's a no.
Then it's a no. With that example, we're speaking about a desire to have partnership, to have a family, to have a commitment, which is one thing, which is one piece of it. But if they're getting a no to that person, then it's a no. They're not getting a no to marriage and building a family and having that life for themselves. They're getting a no to doing it with that person. We can have a set of values and we can have our desires and our dreams, and we can have an image of what that's going to look like and how we're going to get it. But then the universe is going to throw in different things which can either be a distraction or they can be what we deeply desire for ourselves, but we could never imagine that it was going to look like this. And that's when I feel like knowing your intuition and being able to listen to how that shows up, listen to that. Don't try and convince yourself that you're not confused. Don't try and persuade yourself, this is what I've always wanted. Why aren't I saying yes to this? If something's coming up, whether it's a sensation or an emotion or a feeling that's off and you can't place it, don't ignore that.
Why not?
Because that's when I feel like you'll regret it. You'll start doubting yourself. You'll continue to be in a state of confusion. When we ignore those things, they get bigger. That's what's happened to me personally. You know, my mind is very strong. I've tried to convince myself, don't make a big deal about that. No, like trust this person or trust this situation, or that's just something small. Like focus on the good, focus on whatever.
Can you give a very specific example?
Quite early on in a relationship, I didn't feel like I could be myself. I would say particular things and he would sort of, put in little comments that would belittle me, or I'd feel really small. And in those moments, I would obviously, have a reaction and look hurt, and he would brush it off and be like, oh no, I'm just joking. Can't you take a joke? Now, intuitively, I knew that wasn't how I wanted to be treated, and it didn't feel nice to receive, that it wasn't really funny. So no, it wasn't a joke. But the good girl would kick in and be like, leave it alone. Don't cause drama. He's just meaning it as a joke. It doesn't have malicious intention. Don't read into it too much. And obviously there's a lot of programming there in that example, but I intuitively knew that I didn't want to be in that situation, but I ignored it or I pushed it aside because I didn't want to, or I didn't have the courage to step away from it or feel that I was worthy of other treatment.
So you ignored your intuition.
And I prioritized silencing myself over listening to it.
Where did that take you?
It took me into a long journey of what turned out to be a psychologically abusive relationship and being very disconnected from my intuition and a shell of my former self. I basically changed completely.
Was there like a moment where you felt this was coming up for you, that there's something not right in your body?
I think it happened gradually over time, but there was a heaviness. I didn't feel myself and I didn't feel good a lot of the time. I felt quite anxious and like I was waiting for his approval or waiting for things to be good again, like they were at the beginning. So there wasn't one moment in particular. It was kind of, or maybe there was towards the end where I didn't want to feel that sad all the time.
Where was that stored in your body?
The heaviness was probably in my back, in my shoulders, almost like a slumped position. Yeah, and I held myself quite a lot in sort of like a downward pose rather than feeling like I could take up base and breathe.
So you wrote a book about body wisdom, a guide to connecting with your intuitive self. What made you write this book?
I would have a lot of conversations with friends where they were having a challenge in their relationship or they were needing to make a decision at work. And I would say, what does your intuition tell you? And a few of them would be like, what are you talking about? Or I don't know. or I don't know how to even access that or understand that. And that's so common. And I've been through quite a number of things in my life that have almost tried to disconnect me from my intuition. And the ways that I have come back to it is through the body, is through creative arts, is through making sacred time and space to get reflective and cultivate certain practices where I am putting self-love and self-compassion and the wisdom of the body at the forefront. So I wanted to share the practices that have worked for me and invite readers to those practices to get curious about their own relationship with self and to cultivate their own practices that work for where they are at.
So what are people going through when they come to your workshops, and what do they learn?
I don't even know how to answer that. Everyone is going through a million different things at any given time, and they are drawn to my workshops because they're ready to work on it or work through it with the modalities that I offer. Sometimes I will start my workshops in a circle and I'll have these different cards. I invite people to have a look at the cards and see if they're drawn to a particular image or color or position of the body. And they can use the card that they choose to introduce themselves and to state what they were drawn to, what they are working on, what they're curious about, or what their intention is. Some people share a lot, some people share very little, but it's often about, where they're at right now, what they might be moving through, whether it's grief or, they've just come because they have had a really hard, week at work and they wanted something fun and playful for themselves.
So I noticed you highlighted a book, The Creative Art by Rick Rubin, one of the big and trending thought leaders on originality and creativity. He has proven that men have a very creative side, not only necessary to solving problems, but also to innovate and create. Would you say men and women are equally good at connecting with their creativity? And have you experienced any differences?
I would say that I feel like we all, regardless of sex and gender, have the capacity for creativity. I feel like we're all creative beings. We have that capacity. I guess it's a matter of people's programming and their own individual challenges and barriers and resistance to it. They might have been told that, if they were singing in the kitchen as a kid, that they were told, to stop singing, or they drew something in an art class and then was told it was silly. Creativity can look very differently for all of us. People find creative outlets in the garden, in running, in solving maths problems. Like, it looks completely different for every individual. I definitely wouldn't say that one sex or gender is more creative than the other. I feel like we all have that capacity.
And what people do you like working with? What are the most creative people? And what's the sort of evolution of someone coming into your workshop and being extremely disconnected to then leaving and being in their creative expression?
I guess the main thing that I ask for when people come to me is that they remain curious and are open to the invitations and to the practices that I offer, that they try it. In terms of evolution, process is going to look different in every body. So someone could be on the ground in a fetal position with their eyes closed, and then by the end of it, they're stretched out. You have no idea the internal journey that that person has gone on. Another person, being facilitated through the same process with the same guidance, could go from wide-eyed and smiling at the beginning to stomping and raging about the room and then laughing at the end. The process looks completely different for everybody, and I love that. It's such variety because it's really led by the individual and whatever they're moving through, whatever emotions need to be released and felt and shifted.
What is the biggest transformation you have witnessed?
So many years ago, I ran a program for young women, and it was over the course of a couple of months. And one participant came in, and she was incredibly shy, incredibly reserved, had experienced quite a bit of trauma, very mistrusting, and like really didn't want to look me in the eye or any of the other group participants, which is totally fine. That's where she was at. We would meet up weekly to do some group work together where we'd do a variety of different practices. And each practice, again, people were able to do as much or as little. You know, they really had agency over what they shared or how much they participated. After a month, she started to open up. She would, she'd raise her eyes a little bit more. And by the end of the program, she came up to me and she said that she had written a song for the group that she would like to share for the group because she wants it to be their song, like the group's song. And she asked if she could perform it.
That's beautiful.
This is someone who was so shy and reserved, and now she was courageously sharing her gift. You know, she sang and she played the guitar, and she looked at every one of the other girls as she sang these words that she had written for them. It was such an honor to know her and to witness that transformation.
So within that work, if someone really is leaning in, what are some of the obstacles that they come up with?
Not knowing how to self-regulate. A big barrier or a big obstacle that I personally was also afraid of is if I actually allow myself to open up and to feel all of these feelings that I've been bottling up for so long, I'm not going to be functional. I'm just going to collapse. And quite a few people have expressed and shared that that's a fear of theirs. And it's a legitimate fear. We are conditioned to think that we have to show up constantly and be our best selves and function, and we need to take care of ourselves. And often we need to take care of other people, and we need to be able to perform in our roles. So if we allow ourselves to really feel that sadness, we might be days in bed. We might let it be all consuming.
Is that the truth?
I personally feel that when we allow ourselves to feel, whether it's rage, whether it's sadness, whether it's joy. You know, some people have resistance to feeling joy and allowing themselves to be happy. I feel like once we allow ourselves to feel it, there's a permission giving and there's a lightness to it. We actually can't yell and scream and be in this tense state of anger for long periods of time. We're eventually going to exhaust ourselves. We're eventually going to fall asleep. The tears will eventually stop. We need to know that we're safe in order to be able to feel that, but we also need to know that feeling isn't our identity and it's not going to last and be permanent.
Yeah. If you don't do that on the opposite side and give in to your fear that it is going to stick around, what are the consequences of this?
In my experience, it has gone a couple of ways. So I used to do this. This is why I'm such a big advocate for doing the opposite. I used to be really afraid to feel. In my experience, it has gone a couple of ways. So I used to do this. This is why I'm such a big advocate for doing the opposite. I used to be really afraid to feel, particularly sadness. Sadness was too uncomfortable. So I would ignore it. If I felt it coming up, I would squish it down. I would store it in my body. I would only really allow myself to cry if there was a sad movie, and then I would howl. So I would let it out in that safe context, not in any other way. And I just became quite numb. So when I wasn't allowing myself to feel that emotion, I didn't actually allow myself to feel any of the emotions. It was like this monotone, robotic way of living, which isn't fun. And it also meant that if I was disconnected from myself, I couldn't relate. I couldn't be real. I couldn't have relationships with my friends, with my family. I didn't know how to connect with myself and the real human emotions that I was feeling. And therefore, I wasn't able to show up and be a daughter, be a friend, be a good partner. And I feel like that damages the core priority in my life, which is relationships.
Why have you decided to work with body wisdom to help people through that path?
I started to recognize when I disconnected from my emotions, I was disconnecting from my body, but my body still stored it all.
How did you know that your body was still storing it?
I still felt it on some level, but it was like it was numbed. So it was like there was this tension, there was this agitation. It probably came through in my body through like an agitated state. Like I had quite a short fuse, and the way that body work was supportive was through moving. I felt that my emotional state of being numb or being tense from the bottling up was able to change even just through a few movements, and started to feel the benefits, started to feel lighter, started to like be able to let myself feel that emotion. Maybe I'd let the anger build up and then I'd stomp my feet, but only a couple of times because I don't want to make a big deal about it. Or I'd let myself momentarily feel joy, but then go back to being in a normal state. And it was in that bridging between, dance studio to real life that I started to stretch it out a little bit and be like, oh, how would this feel if I did it at home? If that's how I started my day, if when I'm getting agitated on, during that work call, I actually took a moment to step away and release in a different way. So I'm not actually holding it anymore. I'm moving through it. So I think it happened for me in really small increments. And as I felt safer and more comfortable getting to know my body in that way, I became more reliant on it and it just became more of a second nature.
So, if someone is at work and they're feeling themselves getting agitated, do you have a tip for them, a quick tool on what they can do on how to move through the body at work?
A couple of things come to mind, obviously, depending on what their environment allows and what they feel comfortable to do. I like to think that we can work in environments now where we can, have a big shakeout and people aren't going to judge us, but that's not necessarily true. Something that you can do, even just from, the seated position that you're in now, is to tense your body up really tightly. So for me, that really starts with the fists, the shoulders, like even using your elbows to bring in your chest, like kind of like you're curling up.
It feels like a boxing position.
It does, yeah. Shake a little bit and then release just slowly, and using your breath and your exhale, soften and stretch that out. So roll your shoulders back. Just follow those impulses of what needs to be readjusted, what needs to be stretched out. And you could even bring in touch if that feels safe as well. So like shaking, using your breath, if you're able to make some noises as a bit of a release. That's an immediate thing that you can do.
When you're holding a workshop, what are the stages that you take people through to connect with their body wisdom?
I get people to choose a starting position, whether that's lying their full body on the floor or like a seated position or kneeling position or even a standing position. And in that position, bring awareness to the breath. And in even just saying breath, you'll notice that people become more aware of it and they might take a deeper breath. You might slow down a little bit more. And then I encourage them to really, soften into feeling their full weight on the floor. And then we go through a bit of a process. We connect with our body, we connect with our breath, we connect with the support of the earth and feeling our body sensations, noticing what emotions are rising, and then letting the body lead by following different impulses of the body into movement.
Great. And there's a creative expression. Do people usually go home with something? Like, do they create something and like a piece of art that they can take with them?
Yeah. So what I've found is that, the movement is amazing, but there's always something I feel is needed to complete it, to integrate it. And my favorite way of integrating is through the creative arts. So the most common is a big piece of A3 paper. I've got these drawing boards. The participants are encouraged to grab whatever colored pencils or pastels, whether it's oil or soft, because you get that real texture, the different feels. I also put in these pieces of paper that have different writing prompts on them in case they want to bring in words. And so, at the end, participants share that in different ways. So sometimes we share that in pairs, sometimes we share that as a group, sometimes we make a little gallery and we walk through it together and just witness each other's piece. but they often take away their art or their piece of paper that has some words that might become their mantra. They've got images that might remind them of connecting to their breath or whatever insights they got. These messages come through the body, these images and symbols come through. And if we can be reminded of them through capturing them in some way, we can access it again and again and again.
I read in your book about a compassion box. What's a compassion box, and what are the things that absolutely need to be in your compassion box?
Hmm. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad that resonated. So that's in one of the chapters where I'm really encouraging some self-love and self-compassion practices. And it's a box, but it could be, it could be an altar, it could be a drawer in your cupboard, whatever is accessible for you. And the idea of this compassion box, or this really intentional collection of different items, it's kind of like a first aid kit for yourself, where you have different items that remind you that you're loved and can support you in feeling different emotional states. I give a couple of examples in the book of what I've got in there. It could be anything from my favorite snacks to a hand-held crystal that feels quite supportive, that, tactile feeling of soft and cold. I'm a words of affirmation person, so I have examples of cards or letters that my friends have given me over the time that I can reread in those moments where I'm feeling down and be reminded that I have people in my corner.
It's a good reminder. I really like the idea to have little letters from friends and loved ones in difficult times. We often feel like we are alone in this.
Mm.
And it's nice to know that we are loved. And a letter from a friend or a family member, there can't be any more proof. In the book also, you mention to use the word I am when journaling. Why is this important?
Yes, statements like I am and I want and I need. You're putting a stake in the ground and you're claiming this for yourself. So an example could be like, I am powerful. And even saying the words, like having them written out and, really embodying them as you say them. They're powerful statements that you're creating for yourself, that are coming from a place where there's a part of you that knows that you are. And so it's almost like these little reminders that we are powerful. There is heaps of research done on the power of physically writing things out and making statements and writing out those statements. It centers you, it grounds you in that feeling that you can return to.
So, what's the right way to working with these statements? What are the things you want to avoid, and what are the things you want to encourage?
I try and avoid saying that there's a right or wrong way to do anything. I give examples in the book of different prompts. They're almost little prompts to get you in a state of reflection and stream of consciousness writing, and allow yourself to be surprised. It's a way of dialoguing with different parts of ourselves and tapping into the wisdom that we do have, but we often don't believe that we have it. If there's a prompt that you feel a little bit of charge around, or you feel called to answer, I would encourage you to answer that one. Even if there might be a bit of resistance, like, oh, I don't know about that one. I don't know what I am. Cool. Get curious about that.
How do you know you're answering that truthfully, especially when you're being triggered around it?
For me, I will know when I'm kind of writing a little bit from my head rather than from a deep inner truth. And the point that I know that it really is the truth, when there's an emotional charge behind it. I might be like just writing, writing, writing. And then when I've written something that lands, that's like, I'm just not good enough, then I feel an emotional charge around, whether that be tears start to come, or I start to feel heat in my body or a tension in my body. Then I'm like, oh, I'm onto something here, because my state has changed. I'm having an emotional response.
How do you know, because you're having an emotional response, that that's the truth? And then how do you work around it, especially if it's the truth and you hit the nail on the head and you're like, ooh, I get an emotional charge, but it doesn't feel good?
Probably, most likely, my go-to is to stop writing. That feels uncomfortable. But if I, take a pause, find my breath, and get curious about what just happened, then that could look like wow, I've just written out that I don't feel that I'm good enough. What's that about, Cathy? And then I start like a dialogue, like I inquire about that part of myself. Or I might even take it a little bit further, but I might actually be like, okay, I'm going to talk to the part within me that doesn't feel good enough. What does that part of me want to say right now? Yes, Cathy, you're not good enough because A, B, C, blah, blah, blah. And I write that out. I let that have a voice. I don't shame it. I don't judge it. I don't belittle it. I don't pack it away because it's uncomfortable, but I actually let it have something to say. And I get curious about where that's going to lead. It doesn't mean that my full self believes that, but there's a part of me that's feeling that, and that needs to come out.
I'm curious, how do you introduce body work at that stage?
Love that. So, for example, if I'm writing and I start to feel the emotions rise, the heat on my face, the tension in my body, I might not necessarily be aware of it in the moment. Like I'm writing it out and then I'm like, oh, I'm really hot, or oh, I'm hunched over. I can bring in body work with, again, coming back to the breath. It's all right. You're safe. This is coming up for a reason. I might shake my body out, release my body in different ways. If I've got time and space, I might put some music on and just sort of like dance it out a little bit. But then, this is the juicy part, use the body to go into, okay, where am I feeling this in my body? Where am I feeling that I'm not enough? Does that live somewhere in my body? Oh, what does that want to say? Oh, what does that look like? You are talking to yourself, but you're talking to different parts of yourself. What does that part of you need to express right now? And allow an openness for what might come through. It might be memories come through, times when you were told that you weren't good enough. And your body might need to change position, need to really flesh things out. And I would encourage people to let your body lead in those moments. If you can, allow yourself space to tend to what your body needs in that moment.
So if I was in your workshop and I would come in with anxiety and I would feel into my body and I would feel this anxiety in my knees, that's also my stability, right? And I would like to express that in an artistic way. What does that look like in your workshop?
What I love in one-on-one sessions where we could work directly with what's happening and I'm tracking your body as you're moving, I could then tailor it to you. I could say, what shapes can you make with your knee? How is your knee and your ankle connected? And what movements come forth from that? And that's when the creative expression can come in and you can put in little invitations and then see if they want to take that up.
What else could I do if it's not movement?
What comes to mind in this moment is great. So you're feeling unstable. What does instability feel like? Does that have a movement? Maybe you're really wobbly. Maybe you can't stand up. Or
Yeah.
if you were to embody stability, if you were to feel really grounded, what position would your body take up? How would you move through the world if you were really stable?
What's the practice for someone coming out of your workshop? How can they make sure that the results that they leave with are sticking?
One way that I like to end the movement piece is I ask them, in your movement right now, is there a movement or a shape or a posture or a gesture that can capture what your body has shown you in this journey? And so, for example, your movement might be, a really strong, steady mountain shape, like a triangle shape. And I get them to really feel into that posture or that movement and stay there for a bit longer that might even feel comfortable. Really make that shape, enlarge it, feel it, and that becomes like a movement motive that they can do. When you remake that shape, you're reminding yourself that you are the mountain and you are grounded within yourself and that you can find stability no matter where you are.
And how can I ensure that this always stays programmed as me feeling good and strong? Because I know you said you make them do that for even until the point that it gets almost a bit uncomfortable. How do I make sure it stays in my body?
Don't do it if it feels uncomfortable, if it changes for you, if suddenly that posture then represents another emotional state. then I would encourage people not to do it. But as long as it feels supportive, then I would encourage them to do it. An example is I had a client, was one on one, and what they did, and they were, it was lots of drumming music in that session, like very earthy vibes. And they were doing lots of motions. Now, that can be interpreted however. And my job as a facilitator is not to interpret what they're doing, but to ask questions. How did that make you feel? What felt supportive? And what they shared at the end is that that particular movement that they were doing on repeat was creating a force field for themselves. And within that force field, they felt powerful and they felt like they could push all of the stuff that didn't serve them and that they didn't want to worry about away while they stayed and remained grounded in themselves. And that worked for her to remind herself beyond our session. But, if it got to a point where that wasn't useful anymore, just like anything, I would say to stop doing it, and that maybe we need other reminders, and maybe it shapeshift into a different form.
Have you witnessed someone who has learned from their own body and made a massive transition that was unforeseen or very unexpected?
I think one of the biggest benefits is people feeling more comfortable to be themselves and to show up as themselves in any given time. And what I've seen from people who have continued to come, and I'm always so touched by that, because I'm like, that you get something different every time. And just with the book, there's 20 practices or whatever, but it's not like you do one practice and then you never do it again. It's like these practices, you will get something different from them every time, because you're a different person each time you do it. You're in a different state. You're working through just something different. But to me, one of the most glorious things is seeing people feel more comfortable to be themselves. There's an ownership of who they are and like a relaxed nature about, this is who I am and this is me right now. And there's an acceptance, and it doesn't come from feeling accepted by others, though that's cool too, but it's like a self-acceptance of, this is how I'm showing up right now, and that's okay. Me as me feeling this way is okay.
So I experience that a lot, especially for women. We don't know how to fully be seen. We get very uncomfortable when we feel that someone is totally perceiving us as we are. It's almost like, what if I do something wrong and I won't be liked for it? Can you tell me your relationship to yourself and to you fully being seen as you are in your body?
It's a relationship that has taken a lot of time, and it's something that I've consciously worked at over different seasons of my life. And to be honest, I think a lot of it came from participating as a student in improvised dance classes. It takes a lot of courage to vulnerably share what you're moving through without words in that way. I think I did that practice for about 6 years. And for the first 3 years of that, I would close my eyes and I would move as me and intuitively, but I wouldn't allow myself to see other people seeing me.
Would you say that's avoidance?
Absolutely. And it took me that long to open my eyes and then keep them open as I continued to move, or maybe I was just staying still, whatever it was, and allowed myself to connect with other people's eyes looking at me and not shy away from it and stay with it even when I was turning red and wanting to crawl away.
Wow. What changes in a person when they allow themselves to fully be seen, regardless of what emotion comes up?
I think it's challenging because we can have all the courage in the world to show ourselves and present ourselves. And we can be in really awful situations where we're not accepted, or people brush us off, or people are like, what are you doing? That's ridiculous. And they'll make comments. And if we give those comments or those circumstances power, we will then be impacted by that and will shy away. The negative of that is that we then don't open up and present ourselves to the people who would be loving and welcome us with open arms. And we don't have the opportunity to meet kindred spirits and to meet our tribe that would give us the opposite. So it's really hard. We might have a deep desire to be seen, and then we have a a situation where we're rejected, and rejection hurts, and we don't want to experience that again, so we close up and don't allow that for ourselves. But damn, it feels good when we can open up and we are seen. It takes me back to the weekend where we met. We could have all been really shy and, just done the polite thing and, oh, hello. And, it's a small talk thing, but we didn't. We allowed ourselves to be a bit vulnerable and be a bit real and like, oh, who are you? Oh, I'm actually this. And we could own it. Wow. Like, this person is amazing. I want to know her because you showed me parts of your soul and invited me in, and I felt warmth from you. And in that exchange, I then felt able to do the same. And you then, you connect deeply. But often, we might have situations where we're not privy to that. And it's a really sad thing.
So we make ourselves vulnerable to truly connect, and fully being seen as you are is a vulnerability.
Mm.
Powerful. Good stuff.
Well,
What has been your spiritual journey, and what were pathways that opened up that before you connected with your body were closed to you?
mm. I feel like for me, movement is my spiritual practice. I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in spirit and source. I'm not someone who meditates, but I achieve a meditative state through movement, which connects me to spirit and my intuition and guidance. That's my personal practice. And so movement has opened up worlds for me to receive visions and messages and comfort and support. And I couldn't go back. I couldn't not have this in my life. That doesn't mean that movement is going to be everyone's spiritual practice, but it means that I really hope that people find what is their access to or avenue to connecting in a similar way.
What does it do to you when you find spirit through movement?
So when I'm moving, I feel like this complete liberation, this complete freedom. I feel the pulsations of life force energy. It's like nothing else matters. Whatever I'm moving through, it dissipates because I feel the support of the earth and spirit. And even though I don't know how I might work through whatever it is I'm working through, I know that I will. So it's like this faith and this belief that it's going to be okay.
And do you then use body movement to anchor that support?
Yeah, I use body movement to feel my whole body, to support myself, to self hug, to self love. Yeah, it's a big, big vessel of support.
How can other people contribute to stepping into body wisdom, especially when you're in a partnership and your body is very closely connected to another person's body? What is the exchange, and how can we work with the influence of another person's body wisdom in our life?
Yeah, that's really beautiful. One of the big reasons why I love offering community gatherings and group work is because we can be influenced by other bodies. In the sharing circles at the start and the end, so many different parts of humanity is shared there. But in the actual movement part, you're getting all of this inspiration and influence from the ways that different people and different bodies are moving. And we often can get into habits or patterns with our body where we're doing the same kind of movement over and over again. And then if you're doing that and you look over and you see someone and they're like stretching themselves out, or they're really down low on the floor, you're like, oh, what does that look like? You're inspired to try that on for yourself. And I love that. I love that there's different inspiration in the room. Everybody is going to move differently to the different rhythms. And yes, you're encouraged to find your own internal rhythm, but you're also inspired by different people's flavors as well.
So you mentioned earlier that when you move through your body and you move through the emotions, you always come back to love. Let me come to my final question that I get to ask everyone.
Mm.
What's the most important thing that you have learned about love in your life?
Oh my gosh. What a great question. There's so many different forms of love. And what's coming to me now is reciprocity. When you feel love or want to feel love, how can you show that to others? And the exchange that happens when it's reciprocated, whether that's, with a friend, whether that's in a hug, whether that's in a smile exchange, that is just, it's so beautiful. And I feel like that's what we're all here for. We all deeply desire reciprocity and to be met in different ways and to be met in love. And I say that in terms of love in a general sense, like a universal love of like, I see you, love. And feeling that and surrounding yourself with that and putting yourself in places where you can receive that, I think is living. It's what we're here for.
Thank you so much. If people would like to work with you, where can they find you?
Thank you, Lara. Like, your questions were so beautiful and really got me thinking. So I really appreciate it and appreciate our conversation. My business is called Intuitive Self. It's intuitiveself.com.au, and all the links to my online programs, my in-person workshops, my book are on that. And it's the same for my Instagram handle. So intuitive self _.
Thank you so much for being on the Blissful Public podcast today.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and share this episode with someone who can benefit from it. Have a beautiful day, bliss and bless.